Stop scrolling for just a moment, because for the first time in decades, the phrase World War III isn't just for conspiracy forums or late-night speculation anymore. It's being talked about openly by defense analysts, economists, military strategists, and world leaders. But before panic takes over the headlines, we need to ask a much smarter question. Are we really closer to a global war, or are we just witnessing a period of intense geopolitical change? Let's break this down calmly and with the facts. Right now, the world is seeing the highest level of active military conflict since the Cold War ended. Let's look at the flashpoints. Flashpoint number 1. Russia and Ukraine. The war is now in its third year. NATO continues to supply advanced weapon systems. Russia has ramped up its military production. Across Europe, defense spending has soared to levels we haven't seen in decades. Germany alone has committed over 100 billion euros to modernize its military. This isn't just a regional war anymore. It's a proxy conflict testing NATO's industrial capacity against Russia's wartime economy. Flashpoint number 2. The Middle East. Tensions between Israel and Iran are still extremely high. Iranian-backed militias are active across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. We've seen major disruptions to commercial shipping in the Red Sea, and the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most sensitive strategic choke points on the planet. Nearly 20% of the world's oil flows right through that narrow corridor. Even a small escalation there sends ripples through global markets instantly. Flashpoint number 3. Taiwan and the South China Sea. China has significantly increased its military drills around Taiwan. It's become routine for their aircraft to enter Taiwan's air defense identification zone. In response, the U.S. continues its freedom of navigation operations in the region, and defense budgets across Asia are climbing sharply. But here's the economic kicker. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors, and over 90% of the most advanced chips. A conflict there wouldn't just be a military disaster, it would cripple the global tech industry overnight. Flashpoint number 4. The Korean Peninsula. North Korea continues to test ballistic missiles, showing off its capabilities. South Korea and the United States have expanded their joint military exercises in response. While tensions on the peninsula go up and down, the Korean War never formally ended with a peace treaty, only an armistice. And that brings us to flashpoint number 5. Military spending itself. Last year, global defense spending hit over $2.2 trillion. That's the highest number ever recorded. Countries aren't just talking about security anymore. They are rearming at a historic pace. So, here's the critical question. Does all this high tension automatically mean we're heading for a world war? History teaches us something really important here. World War I didn't start because leaders were actively seeking global destruction. It happened because of complex alliance structures, massive miscalculations, the unstoppable momentum of military mobilization, and a complete failure to de-escalate. World War II didn't just begin overnight either. It grew from a series of regional aggressions that the rest of the world dangerously underestimated. So what makes today similar, and what makes it different? Let's look at the similarities first. Alliance blocs are forming more clearly, a bit like they did in the past. Military spending is accelerating everywhere. Major world powers are deeply involved in proxy conflicts, and strategic choke points, those vital arteries of global trade, are under pressure. But there are also major differences. First and foremost, nuclear deterrence is still incredibly powerful. The United States, Russia, and China all understand the catastrophic cost of a direct confrontation. Second, our economies are massively interdependent. A war between major powers would cause economic self-harm on a scale never seen before. Third, despite the tensions, direct great power confrontation is still being avoided. And finally, critical communication channels between these powers remain open. The single biggest factor preventing World War III right now is that nuclear threat. But here's where the risk starts to climb. Escalation doesn't always start with a grand intention. It often starts with a miscalculation, a drone strike that's misinterpreted, a missile that's intercepted incorrectly, a naval collision in a crowded sea, an attack on a military base that triggers a treaty obligation like NATO's Article 5. That is how complex systems can spiral from tension into direct confrontation, sometimes faster than anyone can control. Now, let's talk about the money, because modern wars aren't just fought by soldiers, they're fought in the markets. If a major multi-front escalation were to happen, here's what we could expect. Oil prices would surge, probably to record highs. Global stock markets would fall sharply. Investors would flee to safe haven assets like gold, causing its price to spike. Shipping insurance rates would explode, making global trade prohibitively expensive. Supply chains, already fragile, would freeze up. And inflation, which we're all tired of, would come roaring back. The global economy today is already in a fragile state. Government debt levels are at historic highs. Central banks are still trying to navigate the fatigue from the last round of inflation, and consumer savings are much thinner than they were in previous cycles. A global military escalation right now would hit the world economy much harder than it did in 2014 or even 2003. But let's ground ourselves in reality. A full-scale World War III scenario, the kind you see in movies, remains unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely. Why? Because the major powers are fighting through proxies, not directly. The US and Russia are not shooting at each other's soldiers in Ukraine. The US and China are not engaged in direct combat over the South China Sea. Iran and Israel are engaged in a shadow conflict, not a declared all-out war. This is what many analysts are calling a Cold War 2.0 environment. We have the high tension, the economic decoupling, the arms buildup, and the proxy conflicts. But we are still avoiding that direct, global battlefield engagement. That said, the margin for error is shrinking. There are more actors on the world stage, more advanced weapons in more hands, more flashpoints that could ignite, and more rapid news cycles and cyber warfare that can spread misinformation and escalate situations in minutes. In an environment like this, the probability of a catastrophic miscalculation just keeps going up. So, are we heading toward World War III? The most accurate answer right now is that we are in a period of intense global power realignment. It's not total war, but it's certainly not peace. The world is shifting away from a unipolar system, dominated by one power, to a multipolar one with several competing centers of influence. And that transition is always unstable. The key indicators to watch are these. First, any direct military engagement between nuclear powers. That is the brightest red line. Second, the closure of major global shipping choke points like the Strait of Hormuz or the Suez Canal. Third, the formal activation of a major defense treaty, like a NATO Article 5 scenario. And fourth, any announcements of full military mobilization by a major power. Until we see those things happen, the situation remains extremely tense, but contained. The world is not at war, but it is more divided, more armed, and more fragile than at any point since the early 1990s. And that growing fragility is exactly why the phrase World War III keeps trending. Not because it has already begun, but because the level of global uncertainty is rising. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does offer powerful warnings. The real question isn't, has World War III started? A smarter, more useful question is this: are the world's powers managing this new era of risk effectively, or are they accumulating it? Because history shows us that great wars don't always begin with certainty and a declaration. They often begin when risk management fails. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider liking the video and subscribing for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world. Stay informed, and stay safe.